My name is Josh Brennan, and I'm about to tell you how my own daughter tried to steal my life. I was 60 seconds away from walking into their trap. Car running, apple pie on the passenger seat, ready to drive to what I thought was just another Sunday family dinner. Then my lawyer's text hit my phone like a punch to the gut. Don't go, it's a setup. My hands started shaking. Not from age. I'm 72, but sharp as ever. From the sickening realization that the two people I trusted most in this world had been planning to destroy me. The Hamilton pocket watch my father left me felt like ice against my chest. 3 generations of honest work, and it was about to witness the ultimate betrayal. Patricia and Kevin didn't just want my money, they wanted to declare me mentally incompetent, take control of everything I'd built, and lock me away like a broken piece of furniture. But here's what they didn't know. This old plumber had spent 35 years solving problems, and I was about to solve the biggest one of my life. What happened next will show you exactly how far a family will go when $1 million is on the line, and how an old man with a hidden recording device can turn the tables on the people trying to bury him alive. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll never look at family dinners the same way again. Most people think retirement means slowing down. For me, it meant finally having time to appreciate the small things that mattered. The way morning light filtered through Helen's lace curtains, the satisfaction of a perfectly balanced checkbook, the weight of my father's watch against my chest, marking time with the same steady rhythm it had kept for half a century. My name is Josh Brennan. I'm 72 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I was living the American dream. Worked 35 years building cornerstone plumbing from a one-man operation running service calls out of a rusted Ford pickup into something that employed 12 people when I sold it. Good, honest work. The kind where you solve problems with your hands and your head, where a man's reputation meant everything and your word was your bond. Helen and I bought the house on Maple Street in 1981 when Patricia was just 8 years old. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen where Helen baked cookies every Sunday, and a basement workshop where I taught my daughter how to change a washer and tighten a loose pipe. We paid $89,000 for it. Today, it's worth $620,000, and every dollar of appreciation represents a memory, an improvement, a year of our lives invested in making it home. After Helen died, that house felt too quiet, but I kept busy. Maintained the garden she loved, spending hours among the roses she'd planted the year before her diagnosis. Fixed things that didn't need fixing, squeaky hinges, loose floorboards, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind occupied. Every morning at 7 sharp, I'd check the balance in my accounts. $620,000 equity in the house, $480,000 in my 401k, $82,000 in savings, $45,000 in checking. Not rich, but comfortable, independent. The numbers mattered because they represented freedom, the freedom to live on my own terms, to take care of myself, to leave something meaningful behind. Sundays belonged to family. Patricia would cook, never as good as her mother, but the effort mattered more than the result. Kevin would update me on his insurance sales numbers, always optimistic despite the struggles I could see behind his eyes. The way his smile never quite reached them. The way he'd check his phone constantly during dinner, as if expecting important news that never seemed to come. And Emma, my granddaughter, would show me her latest art project, or tell me about school drama with the intensity that only 16-year-olds can muster. She was the brightest spot in those dinners, still young enough to hug her grandfather without embarrassment, still interested in the stories I told about her mother's childhood. I looked forward to those dinners. They were the highlight of my week, the thread that connected me to the family Helen and I had built together. The Hamilton watch had been my father's companion through 30 years of factory work at the Bethlehem steel plant. When he passed in 1984, he made me promise to carry it every day. "Time moves forward, son," he'd said from his hospital bed, his voice barely a whisper. "But some things are worth holding on to, Remember where you came from. Remember what matters. I kept that promise religiously. The watch's familiar weight against my chest reminded me daily that I came from good people. People who honored their word, who worked hard for everything they had, who protected what mattered most. People who didn't take shortcuts or look for easy money. I should have been more suspicious when Patricia started asking about my memory. Little questions, casual observations that seemed innocent at first. "Dad, you told that story last week." Or, "Are you sure you took your medicine this morning?" At first I thought she was just caring, maybe worried about me living alone at my age. Natural concern for a daughter whose father had just lost the love of his life. Kevin had been more direct, but also more calculating. "Josh, have you thought about what happens if you get sick? Who's going to handle your finances if something happens to you?" He'd even brought it up over dinner one Sunday, suggesting I might want to consider giving someone power of attorney. You know, just in case, for peace of mind. I appreciated their concern, or I thought I did. The warning signs started small, like hairline cracks in a foundation that you don't notice until the damage is already done. A call from First National Bank on a Tuesday morning asking about a transfer I didn't remember making. $15,000 moved from my savings to checking, then apparently withdrawn in cash over several weeks. "Mr. Brennan, our records show you authorized these transactions," the bank manager, Mrs. Thompson, explained over the phone. Her voice carried the professional courtesy that bank employees use when they're concerned, but trying not to alarm you. "But given the amount and frequency, and your status as one of our valued long-term customers, we wanted to confirm everything was in order." I sat at my kitchen table, Sunday's newspaper spread in front of me, the business section open to stock prices I'd been checking out of habit. Helen's coffee mug still sat on the counter where I'd left it that morning, a small ritual that made the house feel less empty. The numbers Mrs. Thompson was reading didn't add up. I was careful with money, had to be, living on a fixed income where every penny had a purpose and a place. "Can you tell me the exact dates and amounts?" I asked, grabbing a pen from the drawer where Helen used to keep her shopping lists. "3 withdrawals," she said. "November 8th, $5,000. November 15th, $4,500. November 22nd, $5,500. All at the branch near Patricia's house, all made during business hours, when I would have been home watching the morning news or working in the garden, all on days when I'd been nowhere near that part of town. "Mrs. Thompson, I need copies of those withdrawal slips," I said, "and I want to see the security footage from those dates." "Of course, Mr. Brennan. Can you come in this afternoon?" That evening, after reviewing the paperwork that showed my signature on documents I'd never signed, I called Patricia. My hands were trembling slightly as I dialed, not from age, but from a growing suspicion I didn't want to acknowledge. "Honey, I had a strange call from the bank today. They said I withdrew some money I don't remember withdrawing." A pause that lasted just a beat too long. Then, "Oh, Dad, that's exactly what Kevin and I were worried about. Maybe it's time we talked about getting you some help with these things. Memory problems can be scary, but there are people who can help." Help. The word hung in the air like smoke from a fire you can't quite locate. "I don't think it's my memory, Patricia. I think someone accessed my account." Another pause. "Dad, who would do something like that? Maybe you just forgot. It happens to everyone as they get older." I hung up and sat in Helen's chair, staring at the wall where her portrait still hung. The same chair where she'd paid bills every month for 30 years, where she'd balanced our checkbooks and planned our modest vacations and worried about having enough money for retirement. For the first time since she passed, I felt truly alone in that house, and truly vulnerable. The next Sunday dinner felt different from the moment I pulled into Patricia's driveway. I arrived with my usual apple pie, the recipe Helen had perfected over decades of Sunday dinners and family gatherings, but something had shifted in the air. Even the house seemed different somehow, more expensive than it should have been on their combined salaries. Kevin answered the door with more enthusiasm than usual, his smile too bright, his gestures too animated. Josh, great to see you. Come in, come in. Patricia's just finishing up in the kitchen. He took the pie from my hands with exaggerated care, as if I might drop it. This smells incredible. Your apple pie is legendary. Their house was nice. Too nice, maybe, for a part-time medical office worker and a struggling insurance salesman. I noticed new things every time I visited, improvements that should have been beyond their reach. Today it was the granite countertops in the kitchen, probably $8,000 worth of work. Last month it had been the hardwood floors in the living room, and sitting on the entryway table like a casual afterthought was a Louis Vuitton purse that cost more than most people make in a month. "That's a beautiful bag," I said to Patricia when she emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. She touched it briefly, almost defensively, her fingers lingering on the leather as if she were surprised to find it there. "Oh, this old thing? Kevin surprised me for our anniversary last month." Her laugh sounded forced, artificial. "He said I deserved something nice after all these years." Kevin's smile was tight, controlled. "A man's got to take care of his wife, right, Josh? Patricia works hard. She deserves the finer things in life." During dinner, I decided to test something. I'd been thinking about the bank situation all week, wondering if maybe I was losing my edge, if age was finally catching up with me in ways I hadn't noticed. So I decided to play a part, to see how they'd react. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said last week, Kevin, about getting help with my finances." I let my fork waver slightly as I cut my roast beef, a small theatrical touch that felt foreign but necessary. "Sometimes I forget things, small things." Patricia and Kevin exchanged a glance, quick, subtle, but I caught it. The kind of look married couples share when they're thinking the same thing but can't say it out loud. "What kind of things, Dad?" Patricia's voice carried just the right note of concern, but her eyes held something else, something that looked almost like anticipation. "Oh, where I put my checkbook, whether I paid the electric bill on time." I paused, watching their faces carefully. "Yesterday I couldn't remember if I had $10,000 in my savings account or 100,000. Numbers get jumbled sometimes." Kevin leaned forward like a predator sensing weakness. "That must be scary for you, Josh, not being sure about important things like that." "It is," I said, letting genuine emotion creep into my voice. "Because it was scary. Just not in the way they thought. What scared me was the possibility that the two people I trusted most in the world might be planning to betray me." "Well," Kevin continued, his tone carefully casual, "I've been talking to this attorney who specializes in helping seniors. Stuart Hoffman. Really good guy from what I hear. Helps families set up safeguards, you know? Make sure everything's protected if something happens to your mental faculties." "An attorney?" They already had an attorney lined up. The pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve were starting to fall into place. "That's thoughtful of you," I said, still playing the confused old man. "What kind of safeguards?" Patricia jumped in eagerly. "Just basic stuff, Dad. Someone to help pay bills, make sure you don't get taken advantage of by scammers, or make impulsive decisions. We love you too much to let anything bad happen to you." After dinner, while Patricia was getting dessert from the kitchen, I excused myself to use the bathroom. On the way, I passed Kevin's home office. The door was cracked open just enough for me to see papers spread across his desk in organized stacks. At the top of one pile, I caught sight of a business card. "Stuart Hoffman, elder law attorney, specializing in conservatorships and estate planning." When I returned to the dining room, Kevin was on his phone in the kitchen, speaking in low, urgent tones. I caught fragments through the doorway. "Moving faster than we thought. And needs to be done before he gets suspicious. And paperwork should be ready by next week." He ended the call abruptly when he saw me standing in the doorway. "Sorry about that, Josh. Work call. You know how it is in sales. Clients don't respect Sunday evenings." "On a Sunday at 8 o'clock? What client calls their insurance agent on Sunday evening?" As I was leaving, Emma walked me to my car like she always did. She was 16, old enough to see more than adults gave her credit for, but young enough to still speak her mind without calculating the consequences. "Grandpa Josh," she said quietly, glancing back at the house to make sure we weren't overheard, "is everything okay? Mom and Kevin have been acting weird lately. They have these hushed conversations that stop when I walk into the room. I hugged her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling the fragility of her teenage shoulders against my chest. Everything's going to be fine, sweetheart. Your old grandpa knows how to take care of himself. But if something was wrong, you'd tell someone, right? You wouldn't just handle it all by yourself? Smart girl. Too smart for her own good sometimes. I promise you, Emma, if I need help, I'll ask for it. But as I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, Patricia's words echoed in my head. We love you too much to let anything bad happen to you. The problem was, I was starting to think I was the bad thing they wanted to prevent. I called Jonathan Wells first thing Monday morning. I'd used him for the business sale 3 years ago and Helen's estate planning after her diagnosis. If anyone could make sense of what was happening to me, it would be him. Jonathan had the kind of legal mind that saw angles and connections other people missed, the kind of careful, methodical approach that had served me well in business. We met at his office on Tuesday afternoon. I brought the bank statements, the forged withdrawal slips, and a detailed timeline of every conversation I'd had with Patricia and Kevin over the past few months. I told him everything. The mysterious withdrawals, the questions about my memory, Kevin's helpful suggestions about power of attorney, the luxury items that seemed to appear in their house every few weeks. Jonathan listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad in the precise handwriting that had impressed me during our previous dealings. When I finished, he leaned back in his leather chair and rubbed his temples like a man trying to ward off a headache. Josh, I'm going to ask you some direct questions, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you experiencing any memory issues? Any confusion about daily activities? Any moments where you can't remember important conversations or decisions? None. I'm as sharp as I've ever been. Maybe sharper, since I'm paying attention to details I used to take for granted. I can tell you what I had for breakfast every morning this month, what bills I've paid, what shows I've watched on television. My mind is clear. Good, because what you're describing sounds like the setup for conservatorship fraud. He explained it in terms that made my blood run cold, speaking with the clinical precision of someone who'd seen this scenario play out before. Conservatorship, a legal arrangement where a court appoints someone to manage another person's financial affairs when they're deemed incapable of doing so themselves. In legitimate cases, it protected vulnerable adults from exploitation and poor decision-making. In cases like mine, it was legalized theft dressed up as family concern. Here's how it typically works, Jonathan said, pulling out a file folder thick with case studies and legal precedents. First, they establish a pattern of mental incompetence. Missing bills, forgotten conversations, suspicious financial decisions that suggest cognitive decline. They'll document everything, build a paper trail that shows a steady deterioration in your ability to manage your affairs. The bank withdrawals. Exactly. They use your own money to create evidence against you. Then they file an emergency petition claiming you're in immediate danger of financial harm. They present their evidence to a judge. You get maybe a week to respond if you're lucky. And if the court agrees with their assessment, you lose control of everything overnight. How much evidence do they need? Less than you'd think. A doctor's statement about cognitive decline, testimony from concerned family members, proof of questionable financial decisions. The court system is designed to err on the side of protecting vulnerable adults. Judges would rather grant unnecessary conservatorship than risk letting someone be exploited. I thought about the bank withdrawals that bore my signature but not my memory, about Patricia's careful questions about my mental state, about Kevin's attorney friend who specialized in elder law. What would happen if they succeeded? They'd have complete control over your assets. They could sell your house, move you to a care facility against your will, spend your money in whatever they claim is for your benefit. And Josh? He leaned forward, his expression grave. Once conservatorship is granted, it's almost impossible to reverse. The system assumes that if a court found you incompetent once, you probably still are. We spent the next 3 hours developing a strategy that felt like planning a military campaign. Jonathan called it a two-phase approach that would turn their own tactics against them. Phase 1, intelligence gathering. We needed to document their real intentions and uncover the financial desperation that was driving this scheme. That meant following the money trail, recording conversations, and building our own paper trail that told the true story. The good news, Jonathan said, is that they'll want to move fast once they think you're vulnerable enough to justify emergency action. Speed makes people careless, and careless people make mistakes we can exploit. Phase 2, the counter trap. We'd give them what they thought they wanted, a confused, vulnerable old man making increasingly questionable decisions. But instead of becoming their victim, I'd become the bait that exposed their true nature and criminal intent. This is going to require some serious acting on your part, Josh. You'll need to play a version of yourself that they expect to see. Forgetful, impulsive, easy to manipulate. Can you do that convincingly? I touched the Hamilton watch through my shirt, feeling its familiar weight against my chest. My father used to say that sometimes you have to be smart enough to look dumb. I think I can manage that. Jonathan opened a file drawer and pulled out a device about the size of a hearing aid battery. This is a digital recorder, voice-activated, 36-hour battery life, crystal clear audio quality. We can hide it in something you always carry, something they'd never suspect. I pulled out my watch, popping open the case to reveal the intricate mechanism inside. Think your technical expert can fit it in here without affecting the movement? He smiled for the first time that day. Josh, I think we're going to get along just fine. The plan was ambitious but elegantly simple. I'd create a scenario that would force Patricia and Kevin to reveal their true intentions while being recorded. Meanwhile, Jonathan would investigate their finances, looking for the desperation and criminal behavior that were driving this elaborate scheme. One more thing, he said as I was preparing to leave. Don't change your behavior patterns yet. Keep going to Sunday dinners, keep acting normal, keep playing the loving father and grandfather. We need them to think they're in complete control of the situation. I drove home feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope, mixed with determination. They thought they were hunting a vulnerable old man whose best days were behind him. But they were about to discover they'd woken up a protective father who'd spent 35 years solving problems for a living. And this was just another problem that needed a solution. I spent the next week playing the part they expected, carefully calibrating my performance to match their expectations. I called Patricia twice to ask if I'd already told her something, making my voice just slightly confused, just uncertain enough to be concerning. I misplaced my grocery list and mentioned it when Kevin called to check on me, letting him hear the mild frustration in my voice. Small things, but consistent with the narrative they were building about my declining mental state. The recording device fit perfectly inside my Hamilton watch, hidden among the gears and springs that had kept perfect time for decades. Jonathan's technical expert had done masterful work. The modification was invisible and didn't affect the watch's function at all. Friday afternoon, I made my move. I called Patricia, making sure I sounded slightly confused and overwhelmed. Honey, I've been thinking about what Kevin said last week, about getting help with my finances, but I'm also thinking maybe I should simplify things while I still can, while I'm still thinking clearly enough to make good decisions. Now, what do you mean, Dad? Her voice carried a note of carefully controlled interest. Well, this house is getting to be too much for me to manage. All the maintenance, all the worry about repairs and property taxes, and all that money just sitting in accounts, earning practically nothing. Maybe I should do something meaningful with it while I'm still around to see the good it does. A pause that stretched just long enough for me to imagine the alarm bells going off in her head. Dad, that sounds like a really big decision. Maybe we should talk about it together, as a family. I've already started looking into it, actually. There's this charity that helps veterans like your grandfather was. They called me last week after getting my name from somewhere, and we had a long talk about their programs. I'm thinking about donating most of my savings to them. Keep just enough to rent a little apartment somewhere, maybe one of those senior communities. Dad, that's... Another pause, longer this time. How much money are we talking about? Oh, probably 400,000 or 500,000. Most of what your mother and I saved over the years. I figure if I sell the house too, that's another 600,000 or so. Could really make a difference for those boys coming home from overseas with problems. The silence stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was strained, artificial. Dad, I think you should hold off on any big decisions like that, at least until we can all sit down and talk it through together, as a family. Kevin has some experience with financial planning, and maybe we should get that attorney friend of his involved. Well, I already made an appointment with their development office for next Tuesday. Nice young man named Bradley said they could start the paperwork right away, really enthusiastic about the whole thing. After I hung up, I sat back in Helen's chair and waited. If I was right about what was happening, I wouldn't have to wait long. Kevin called within an hour, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Josh, Patricia mentioned you're thinking about some major charitable giving. That's incredibly generous of you, but don't you think it makes sense to make sure your own future is secure first? What do you mean, Kevin? I mean, what if you need long-term care? What if there are major medical expenses? Wouldn't it be better to hold on to that money until you're absolutely sure you won't need it for your own care? I suppose that's possible, but Kevin, I feel really good about this decision. It's what Helen would have wanted. She always said we had more than we needed. Josh, his voice changed, became more urgent and less careful about maintaining the facade of concern. I really think we need to talk about this face to face, in person, soon. Of course. See you Sunday, like always. No, I mean sooner than that. How about tomorrow? Patricia and I could come over, maybe bring some lunch from that deli you like. Saturday morning, they showed up at my door with sandwiches from Goldstein's Deli and expressions of barely concealed worry. I played my part perfectly. A lonely widower excited about his charitable giving, maybe a little too excited, maybe not thinking as clearly as he should be. The foundation representative is coming Tuesday at 2 o'clock, I told them over lunch, my voice carrying just the right note of confused enthusiasm. Bradley's going to bring all the paperwork with him. They said I could transfer everything electronically, have it done by the end of the week if I want. Patricia looked physically ill. Dad, please, just wait a few days. Let us help you think this through properly. I appreciate that, honey, but I've thought it through. This feels right to me. It feels like the right thing to do. That's when Kevin finally played his hand, abandoning the pretense of casual concern. Josh, I've been meaning to talk to you about something else. Stuart Hoffman, that attorney I mentioned, he's offered to review your entire financial situation for free, as a favor to the family, just to make sure everything's organized properly. That's nice of him. The thing is, he has some real concerns. Based on what I've told him about your recent memory issues, and now this sudden decision about donating everything you own, he thinks there might be some legal protections we should put in place immediately. Legal protections? Patricia leaned forward, taking my hand in both of hers. It's called conservatorship, Dad. It just means someone helps you make major financial decisions. We could set it up so that both Kevin and I have to approve any large expenditures or major changes to your assets. There it was, out in the open, just like Jonathan had predicted. That sounds complicated, I said, letting confusion cloud my voice. Do I really need that? Stuart thinks it might be a very good idea, Kevin said, especially if you're planning to give away your life savings on what amounts to an impulse decision. I let that sink in, played the confused old man who was beginning to understand he was being cornered by people who claimed to love him. Are you saying you don't think I should give money to charity? We're saying maybe you shouldn't give away everything you own, Patricia said, and maybe you need some help making sure you don't make decisions you'll regret later. After they left, I called Jonathan immediately. It's happening. They want to file for conservatorship. Soon. How long do we have? Not long. They're panicking about the charity donation. I'd guess they'll file the emergency petition within days. Then it's time for phase 2. The recording device in my Hamilton watch had captured every word, every inflection, every moment of their mask slipping. But more importantly, it had captured the moment when their true motivations became crystal clear. They weren't worried about my well-being. They were worried about their access to my money. Sunday's dinner was pure theater. Patricia and Kevin were trying desperately to act normal, but tension radiated from them like heat from an overworked engine. Every gesture seemed calculated, every smile forced, every word chosen with careful precision. I kept the recording device running the entire time, and they didn't disappoint me. During dessert, while Emma was upstairs doing homework and couldn't overhear, they made their final, desperate pitch. "Dad," Patricia began, her voice carrying a tone I'd never heard before, urgent but trying to sound casual. "Kevin and I spent yesterday talking to Stuart Hoffman about your situation. He thinks we should move forward with the conservatorship petition this week." "This week? That seems awfully fast." I let surprise color my voice, as if the speed of their timeline was unexpected rather than exactly what I'd been predicting. "The thing is," Kevin said, leaning forward with the intensity of a salesman closing a deal, "if you go through with this charity donation, it might be seen as clear evidence that you're not thinking rationally. Stuart says it's better to get the legal protections in place before any irreversible financial damage is done." "Financial damage?" "Giving away your life savings," Patricia said, her voice rising slightly before she caught herself and modulated it back down. "That's not something a financially competent person does, Dad. No reasonable person gives away everything they own to strangers." I set down my coffee cup with deliberate care, letting the ceramic clink against the saucer. "Your mother and I always planned to leave something substantial to charity. It was important to her, part of our values." "But not everything, Dad. Not when you might need expensive long-term care, not when you have family who could benefit from all the hard work you and Mom put in over the years." There it was, the real motivation, stated as clearly as if she'd written it in block letters. "I see," I said slowly. "So you think I should keep the money for family?" "We think you should keep the money safe," Kevin corrected quickly. "Under proper management, protected from impulsive decisions and potential exploitation." "And you two would be the proper managers?" Patricia reached across the table and took my hand with both of hers, her grip tight enough to be uncomfortable. "Dad, we love you. We just want what's best for you. We want to protect you from making a mistake you can't undo." "What's best for me or what's best for you?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kevin's face flushed red, the careful mask of concern slipping for just a moment. "Josh, I don't think that's fair. We're trying to help you here. We're trying to save you from yourself." "Help me what? Stay rich? Stay under your control so you can eventually inherit everything?" "Stay safe," Patricia said, but her voice carried an edge now. "Dad, you're forgetting things. You're making impulsive decisions that could ruin your future. You need someone looking out for your best interests." I stood up slowly, suddenly tired of the performance, tired of pretending to be something I wasn't. "You know what I think? I think you're worried I'm going to spend your inheritance before you can get your hands on it. I think you've been planning this for months, maybe longer. I think you've been systematically setting me up." Kevin stood too, no longer trying to hide his anger or desperation. "You want to know what I think? I think you're a stubborn old man who can't accept that his mind is going, who can't admit that he needs help managing his affairs. And if you won't accept that help voluntarily, then yes, we'll get the court to force you to accept it." "Kevin," Patricia hissed, but it was too late. He was beyond caring about subtlety now, beyond maintaining the facade of loving concern. "Stuart says we have more than enough evidence of mental incompetence to get emergency conservatorship. Your memory problems, the suspicious bank withdrawals, this insane charity scheme, it all points to seriously diminished capacity." "What bank withdrawals?" Kevin's face went white as he realized what he'd just revealed. He'd said too much, admitted knowledge he shouldn't have possessed. "The ones you forgot about," Patricia said quickly, trying to cover for her husband's slip. "The $15,000 you mentioned to the bank." "I never mentioned anything to the bank about $15,000, I said quietly. "I never made those withdrawals, and I think both of you know exactly who did." I walked to the entryway and picked up my coat, moving with the deliberate calm of a man who'd just had his worst suspicions confirmed. As I was leaving, I heard Kevin's voice from the dining room, no longer caring who might overhear. "Call Stuart first thing tomorrow morning. Tell him we need to file the emergency petition immediately. That old fool thinks he's being clever, but once we get conservatorship, he won't know what hit him. He'll be lucky if we let him keep enough money for cigarettes and candy bars. I had everything I needed now. Every word was captured on the device in my watch. Every admission, every threat, every moment of their masks coming off completely. The war was about to begin in earnest. Monday morning brought news that confirmed everything Jonathan and I had suspected. He called me at 8 o'clock sharp, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a man whose theories had been proven correct. Josh, you're not going to believe what our investigation turned up about Kevin Morrison's financial situation. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the Hamilton watch open in front of me, while Jonathan's technical expert extracted the digital recordings from Sunday's dinner. The morning light streaming through Helen's lace curtains felt different somehow, sharper and more focused. Tell me everything. Gambling debts, $89,000 spread across 3 different casinos in Atlantic City, plus another $15,000 he owes to a private bookie who's been making increasingly hostile inquiries about payment. But that's just the beginning. And he walked me through Kevin's complete financial disaster, credit card debt totaling $47,000, a second mortgage on their house that Patricia apparently didn't know about, a loan against his car that was already in default, and a pattern of risky financial behavior going back years. Kevin Morrison's drowning financially. His insurance commissions have been falling steadily. He's got a serious gambling addiction that he's hiding from Patricia, and he's been borrowing money from increasingly dangerous sources. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. That's why they need my money. It's not just greed, it's desperation. It gets worse, Josh. I had our forensic accountant trace that $15,000 from your account. It went directly into Kevin's personal checking account, then straight to Atlantic Star Casino the exact same day. He's been using your money to pay his gambling debts. He stole from me to fund his addiction. And when $15,000 wasn't enough to solve his problems, they decided to go after the entire pot. Josh, Stuart Hoffman filed the emergency conservatorship petition 2 hours ago. They're claiming you have moderate dementia and pose an immediate financial danger to yourself. My hands tightened around my coffee mug hard enough to make my knuckles white. How long do we have? Emergency hearing is scheduled for Thursday morning, 3 days. But here's the thing. I've been thinking about this all weekend, and I have a plan that might not just defend against their petition, but destroy them completely. Jonathan's strategy was more aggressive than anything I'd expected. Instead of simply defending against their conservatorship petition, we'd go on the offensive with a counterattack that would expose their criminal behavior and turn the courtroom into their worst nightmare. The beauty of this approach, he explained, is that they've committed multiple felonies in pursuit of your money. Elder abuse, identity theft, fraud, forgery. The evidence is overwhelming. We'll let them present their fraudulent case first. Let them dig their own graves with lies and fabricated evidence. Then we'll bury them so deep they'll need archaeological equipment to find daylight. What kind of evidence are we talking about? 3 expert witnesses who'll systematically destroy every aspect of their case. Dr. Helen Morrison, and yes, the name similarity is just coincidence, is a neurologist who specializes in cognitive assessment. She's going to test you this week and provide a comprehensive report on your mental competence. And if I somehow fail her tests? Jonathan smiled with the confidence of a man holding 4 aces. Josh, you're not going to fail any tests. Trust me on this. Your mind is sharper than most people half your age. The second witness is Raymond Torres, a forensic accountant who's traced every dollar Kevin stole and mapped out his complete financial disaster. He's going to walk the court through Kevin's gambling addiction, his mounting debts, and his systematic theft from your accounts. And the third? Lisa Chang, our audio forensics expert. She's going to authenticate every word of those recordings and play them for the judge. By the time she's finished, the court will understand exactly who the real criminals are in this situation. Wednesday evening brought an escalation that made my blood run cold. Jonathan called with an update that revealed just how far Patricia and Kevin were willing to go. Josh, they've hired a private investigator to follow you and document your daily activities. They're also spreading rumors in your neighborhood, telling anyone who'll listen that you're suffering from advancing dementia and might be dangerous. Dangerous? They're laying groundwork for a much broader legal assault. They want full guardianship, not just financial conservatorship. That means control over where you live, your medical care, every aspect of your life. They want to put you in a care facility and liquidate all your assets. I sat down heavily in Helen's chair, feeling the weight of their betrayal, like a physical blow. They're really going to try to steal my entire life. Yes, they are. But Josh, tomorrow's hearing is going to be unlike anything they're expecting. They think they're walking into a friendly courtroom where a confused old man will be easily disposed of. Instead, they're going to face a legal ambush that will destroy them completely. Are you absolutely certain we can win this? Jonathan's voice carried absolute conviction. Josh, by the time we are finished, Kevin will be facing felony charges, and Patricia will be lucky to avoid criminal prosecution herself. They picked the wrong target and underestimated the wrong man. I thought about my father's watch, about Helen's memory, about the life we'd built together through decades of hard work and careful planning, about Patricia, who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read her stories about brave knights and fair princesses who always triumphed over evil. I'm ready for war, I said. Good, because tomorrow we're going to give them one they'll never forget. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of bitter wind that cuts through even the heaviest coat. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the charcoal gray one Helen had helped me pick out for our 40th anniversary celebration, her favorite navy tie, and the Hamilton watch in my vest pocket, where it had rested for decades. Jonathan met me at the courthouse steps, his briefcase thick with evidence and his expression grimly satisfied. Remember, he said, adjusting his own tie against the wind, let them go first. Let them present their entire fraudulent case. Don't react, don't argue, don't show any emotion at all. Just sit there and let them hang themselves with their own lies. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with wood paneling that had probably been installed in the 1970s, and fluorescent lighting that cast everything in an unflattering pale glow. Judge Martha Harrison presided from the bench, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd heard every lie and seen every scam during 30 years on the bench. Patricia and Kevin sat with Stuart Hoffman at the petitioner's table, their backs rigid with tension. They wouldn't look at me. Hoffman presented their case with the practiced efficiency of a lawyer who specialized in this kind of legal theft. He painted a picture of Josh Brennan as a declining old man, prone to memory lapses and increasingly poor judgment. He cited the mysterious bank withdrawals as evidence of financial confusion. He described my sudden decision to donate my life savings to charity as clear proof of diminished mental capacity. Your Honor, Hoffman concluded, his voice carrying just the right note of concerned professionalism, Mr. Brennan represents a clear and present danger to his own financial well-being. Without immediate intervention, he will dissipate his entire estate and leave himself destitute and dependent on public assistance. Patricia testified first, playing the role of devoted daughter to perfection. She spoke about my alleged memory lapses, my supposed confusion about daily activities, my apparent inability to manage simple financial tasks. She was convincing, hitting all the right emotional notes, her voice breaking slightly when she described her fear for my future. He told me he couldn't remember if he had $10,000 or $100,000 in his savings account, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I'm afraid he's going to give everything away to strangers and have nothing left for his own care. I couldn't live with myself if I let that happen. Kevin followed with similar testimony, adding carefully crafted details about my erratic behavior and increasingly inappropriate financial decisions. He spoke about finding me confused and disoriented, about conversations that I supposedly forgot immediately afterward. The man who raised Patricia was careful with money, responsible, practical, he said, his voice heavy with manufactured sadness. This version of Josh Brennan wants to give away $600,000 to a charity he'd never heard of until last week. That's not the action of a mentally competent person. Dr. Amanda Foster, a geriatric psychiatrist Kevin had hired, testified that based on family reports and her limited interaction with me, I exhibited classic early signs of dementia and should be immediately placed under protective conservatorship. The pattern is entirely consistent with cognitive decline, she said, consulting notes she'd apparently taken during a 15-minute phone conversation. Memory loss, impaired judgment, impulsive decision-making regarding finances. I strongly recommend immediate conservatorship to protect Mr. Brennan from further financial harm to himself. When Hoffman rested his case, Judge Harrison looked directly at Jonathan with the expression of someone who'd seen this particular performance many times before. Mr. Wells, I assume you have a response? I do indeed, Your Honor. The defense calls Dr. Helen Morrison. Dr. Morrison took the witness stand with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent decades dealing with complex neurological cases. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of confidence that comes from genuine expertise rather than hired gun testimony. Dr. Morrison, did you conduct a cognitive assessment of Mr. Brennan? I did. A comprehensive neurological and psychological evaluation, including standardized memory tests, executive function assessments, and detailed psychological screening. The testing took place over 6 hours across 3 separate sessions to ensure accuracy and eliminate any possibility of fatigue affecting the results. And your findings? Mr. Brennan scored in the 95th percentile for his age group across all cognitive measures. His memory, both short-term and long-term, is not just normal, but exceptional. His judgment and reasoning skills are sharp and sophisticated. There is absolutely no evidence of dementia, cognitive decline, or any other mental impairment that would affect his capacity to manage his financial affairs. The courtroom was dead silent. I could hear Patricia's sharp intake of breath from across the room. In fact, Dr. Morrison continued, Mr. Brennan's cognitive function is superior to many people half his age. He demonstrates excellent abstract reasoning, superior problem-solving skills, and intact executive function. The suggestion that he lacks mental capacity to manage his finances is not only unsupported by clinical evidence, it's contradicted by every objective measure we have. Hoffman's cross-examination was weak and desperate, focusing on the family's observations rather than clinical findings. Dr. Morrison dismissed their concerns with clinical precision. Family members are often the least reliable observers of cognitive decline, she said matter-of-factly. They frequently see what they expect to see, or in some cases, what they want or need to see for their own purposes. Jonathan's second witness was Raymond Torres, the forensic accountant whose charts, timelines, and bank records told a story that was damning in its clarity and comprehensiveness. Mr. Morrison accessed Mr. Brennan's bank accounts using stolen personal information, Torres testified, pointing to enlarged documents displayed for the court. The $15,000 in question was transferred directly to Mr. Morrison's personal account and used to pay gambling debts at Atlantic Star Casino on the exact same day. He walked the court methodically through Kevin's complete financial disaster, the mounting gambling debts, the desperate attempts to borrow money from increasingly dangerous sources, the pattern of risky financial behavior that had been escalating for years. Mr. Morrison currently owes $89,000 to various creditors, with interest and penalties compounding daily, Torres continued. His access to Miss Brennan's substantial assets through conservatorship would solve his immediate financial crisis, while providing ongoing access to funds for his gambling addiction. Judge Harrison leaned forward, her expression sharpening with interest. Are you saying, Mr. Torres, that this petition's motivated entirely by financial gain rather than genuine concern for Mr. Brennan's welfare? That's exactly what I'm saying, Your Honor. This is a calculated scheme to steal an elderly man's life savings under the cover of legal conservatorship. But the knockout blow came with Lisa Chang, our audio expert. She authenticated the recordings from the Hamilton watch with scientific precision, then played them for the court with crystal clarity. The courtroom heard Kevin's voice. Call Stewart first thing tomorrow morning. Tell him we need to file the emergency petition immediately. That old fool thinks he's being clever, but once we get conservatorship, he won't know what hit him. Patricia's voice. We love you too much to let anything bad happen to you. And then Kevin again. He'll be lucky if we let him keep enough money for cigarettes and candy bars. By the time the recordings finished playing, Patricia was crying openly and Kevin was staring at his hands like a man watching his life collapse in real time. Judge Harrison's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Mr. Hoffman, it appears your clients have been considerably less than honest with this court about their true motivations for this petition. She turned to Patricia and Kevin with the expression of a judge who just watched justice being perverted in her own courtroom. You've presented fraudulent evidence, made false claims about Mr. Brennan's mental capacity, and admitted on your own recorded words your intent to steal his life savings. This court finds no evidence whatsoever that Mr. Brennan lacks capacity to manage his affairs. The gavel fell with the finality of Judgment Day. Petition for conservatorship is denied in its entirety. Furthermore, this court is referring this matter immediately to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of elder abuse, identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy charges. As we left the courthouse, Kevin was already in handcuffs, being led away by sheriff's deputies. Patricia was crying and begging me to forgive her, to understand that she'd been desperate and scared. I walked past them both without saying a word. Justice felt better than I'd expected, but it felt different too, quieter, more like relief than victory, more like the end of a nightmare than the triumph of good over evil. 6 months later, I was sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and the morning paper when the doorbell rang. Emma stood on my porch, looking older than her 16 years, her face carrying the weight of everything that had happened to our family. Hi, Grandpa Josh. Emma, come in, sweetheart. She sat at my kitchen table, in the same spot where I'd planned my defense against her mother and stepfather just months earlier. Kevin had pled guilty to elder abuse, identity theft, and fraud. He was serving 18 months in state prison and would pay full restitution of every stolen penny. Patricia had received 3 years probation and 500 hours of community service, plus a permanent restraining order that prohibited her from contacting me without court supervision. I wanted to apologize, Emma said, her voice small and uncertain, for what they did to you, for not stopping it somehow. Emma, you didn't do anything wrong. You have absolutely nothing to apologize for. I knew something was going on. I could see how stressed Mom was, how Kevin was always on his phone with hushed conversations. I could have said something, could have warned you. I reached across the table and took her hand, feeling how cold her fingers were despite the warm spring day. Sweetheart, this was never your responsibility. You're 16 years old. Your job is to worry about algebra and boyfriends and what you want to study in college, not to police the adults in your life. But I still feel guilty. Don't. Your mother made her choices, and Kevin made his. They're both adults who decided to commit crimes against someone who loved them. You're not responsible for their decisions or their consequences. We talked for over an hour about everything that had happened, and everything that was going to happen next. About how she was living with Patricia's sister now, about school, about her plans for college, about how the family would rebuild after this betrayal. She seemed lighter somehow, as if a weight she'd been carrying for months had finally been lifted from her shoulders. Before she left, I had something important to share with her. I've been working with Jonathan on setting up a trust fund, I said, pulling out the legal documents we'd finalized the week before, for your college education and whatever comes after. It's completely protected. Your mother and Kevin can't touch it, can't influence it, can't interfere with it in any way. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Grandpa, you don't have to do that. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. Your grandmother and I always believed in investing in the next generation, in making sure that good people had opportunities to build good lives. That trust fund will be there when you need it, and no one can take it away from you. After she left, I called Jonathan to finalize the last piece of my revised estate planning. I want to make one final change to my will. I told him. The house goes to Emma when she turns 25. That gives her time to mature and understand the responsibility that comes with real property. Everything else gets split equally between her education trust and the Veterans Foundation that Helen and I always supported. What about Patricia? Patricia made her choice when she decided Kevin's gambling debts were more important than her father's welfare. Some choices have permanent consequences. The irony wasn't lost on me. Patricia had been so terrified that I would give away her inheritance that she'd tried to steal it outright. In the end, her fear had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I spent that evening in Helen's chair, holding the Hamilton watch, and thinking about everything that had happened. My father had been right all those years ago. Time moves forward, but some things are worth holding on to. Not just physical objects like watches and houses, but the principles they represent. Honesty, hard work, protecting the people you love from those who would exploit them. I'd learned something important during those weeks of quiet war against my own family. Protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. Love your family, but verify their intentions with your eyes wide open. When money gets involved, even the closest relationships can change in ways you never imagined possible. This had never been about revenge against Patricia and Kevin. It had been about reclaiming my dignity, my autonomy, and my fundamental right to decide my own future. Sometimes you have to fight to keep what's rightfully yours, especially when the threat comes from people who claim to love you. The Hamilton watch ticked steadily against my chest, marking time with the same reliable rhythm it had maintained for decades. Time moves forward, just like my father said. But some things, the important things, the things that define who you are, those are worth holding on to no matter what. If my story sounds familiar, if you recognize warning signs in your own life or in the lives of people you care about, don't ignore them. Knowledge and preparation are the best protection we have against those who would exploit our trust. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who might be facing their own quiet war, because sometimes the people who say they love you most, who claim they're acting in your best interests, are the very ones you need to watch most carefully. Trust is precious, but it should never be blind, even with family, especially with family when money is involved. The watch kept perfect time, just as it always had, just as it always would. Some things are worth holding on to. Some battles are worth fighting. Some victories are worth everything they cost.